I'd like to begin by introducing Reverend Michael Yoshi, who is going to speak about the genesis, the beginning of this process. Michael?
Thank you, Judy, and thank you, Mayor Ashcraft. I remember so well your daughter playing basketball. Basketball is the common denominator, right?
Yeah.
Too bad for the Warriors yesterday. I understand there's going to be a little prayer circle in the back by the barbecue.
We're blue and yellow.
Judy asked me to come and just share a little bit about the genesis of the project, and I served, well, first I should say greetings to community members and church folks and the Amen choir over here. It's good to be back here. I think this is the second time I've been back on the ground, so it's kind of emotional to be back in the space. And greetings to Pastor Myrna, and so much gratitude for the ministry she's carrying on here for Buena Vista. So these markers will be, there are 4 markers, and they will be part of a walking tour of the Alameda, Japantown. You're going to hear more about the details from Joe Shiraki later, and also from Joe Takata. But here today, this marker kind of grounds us in the history of Buena Vista. Today is also the library marker that will be there a few blocks away. There's one at the Alameda Marketplace, and then at a sister religious community, Buddhist temple, is a marker there. Each of the 4 markers can be the launching place for a walking tour of the old Japantown. And so I was trying to recollect the genesis of how this came about, but it was prior to my retiring in 2020, where we began to talk a lot about the need to commemorate some of the Japanese American history for this congregation in particular, because the congregation was becoming more multicultural. And so we wanted to make sure that we were grounded in the history, not to live in the past, but to help inform the present by what had gone on for people. And this space had been a sanctuary for, if you can imagine, first-generation immigrants who came here in 1898 and before, and they started a fellowship and we began to congregate here, particularly in times of segregation and in times of discrimination. This was a social haven for people. And so how to capture some of that history and embed it here in the congregation. And thanks to Joe Takata, who you hear a little bit later, Joe had already been doing a lot of oral histories and history compilation, and she had helped create the community map around where the Japanese lived in the 5-block radius here of Buena Vista and the Buddhist temple over on Pacific Avenue. In fact, Joe used to do walking tours for this event that we would hold every year, but it was very informal. She would just gather people and take a walk through the neighborhood and show people where the Japanese families used to live around the spaces here that were congregated around. But the segue was that it was beginning to become important to know that it was important to commemorate this history not only for our church, but also for the community. And so there was a natural conversation that was taking place with the Buddhist temple, which Buena Vista has had long historic relationships with, about doing a project together. And then community partners, Janet Kweke with Rhythmics, came into the conversation. And she actually approached the Alameda Marketplace to see if they would be the host for a marker there. Former Councilman John Knox White was asked to ask the City Council for funding, and the city was able to say they'll fund the marketplace marker and then also the library marker, which Jane Chisaki championed as the director of the library and as a Japanese American herself, someone who we would work with for many years. And so the 4 locations were identified, and the project then was launched with this vision of having these 4 markers. And I think that was back in 2020 or so, and it's taken quite a while. But this couldn't have been done without the work of Kaz Naganuma, who I want to, I think Judy has already identified him, but I want to ask us to give him a round of applause. Kaz runs his own creative design company and is well respected and known in many circuits and circles. But Kaz and I were on a Day of Remembrance program in San Francisco a few years ago. I think it was 2020, right, Kaz? And as we were preparing to speak, we were catching up with each other on things. And I didn't know, but Kaz was the designer for the markers in Japantown, San Francisco. And he showed me the markers there. And I told him, I've got a project for you guys. And I think he may have regretted saying yes, because it's taken so long and so much of his time. But I think he was the saving grace to have somebody with his expertise and experience and knowledge to be able to be kind of the creative consultant to help design the markers for all of the spaces. Jill's going to talk a little bit later about the actual content of the markers as well. But anyway, a great debt of gratitude to Kaz for jumping in and doing it pro bono, friends. He did it on his own time. I just want to close with a couple of stories before I turn it over to, I think, to Joe or back to Judy. And that is, as you come into this space today, and I think members of the church know this, it's an historic place. This space was located for the church in the early 1900s after the congregation had been started as a fellowship in 1898. But if you can imagine, right here, there was a Victorian house that used to be the chapel. It used to be the gathering place for people. But there's a photo from 1942 when people left to go to the camps in Topaz. And it's a historic photo. I think they'll probably be on display here somewhere today, if not in the marker itself. But it's just, if you think back to those times, over 80 years ago, and just what the climate was, what people were experiencing, we're standing on holy ground, on sacred ground, where people experienced a devastating chapter in the history of our community. And as we come to revisit the place, we pay homage to the space. And the interfaith relationships with the Buddhist community, I think, are very unique among religious communities. Always have had very strong interfaith relationships with the Buddhist community, and Buena Vista has always been very open and embracing of other faiths. And I wanted to share it with you. On the map for the community would be the house of the Takeda family. The family members are here today, and Joe is one of the daughters, and Judy. By the way, Joe and Judy were born in camp in Topaz, so they are living history, and have many stories to tell. But their mother, Nellie, was like the matriarch of the church, and also, in some sense, a matriarch of the community. Because when I was here, you'd always see people coming and going from her house like a bus stop. And they'd be people from the temple coming over after their services, people from here, people during the week visiting from Watsonville and Sebastopol. And I'd meet so many people because of her hospitality. She really showed this great Christian hospitality. And believe it or not, friends, after she passed away, we brought her kitchen table in to be the communion table for the sanctuary. And as you go into the sanctuary today, you'll see the table there. And that, to me, also is making sacred the very ordinary, but her space and her home was the sacred place for people to gather, meet one another, form relationships, and survive together as a community. And I know she's looking down upon us today and feeling very happy that this has taken place. And the last story I want to share, and I'll give it over, never give a preacher a microphone. But there was a man named Shiz Kawamura who was very dear to this church because he was the one that used to always walk around the buildings and repair things. You always have somebody like that at a church. He was an engineer by background, but he volunteered here many years. And he would always tell me when he was a kid, he watched the Issei first generation build this very building, this social hall that was referenced in the proclamation, built around 1926 by Issei by their own hands. And he just said he was mesmerized by the work that they did, and he would come and play, and they would let him kind of hang around. And so this building was very dear to him. And when we were doing a renovation in 2000, he told us, don't replace the floor. We were talking about replacing the floor because it's very old. Leave it there because you can see in the scars of the wood, the reminders, the scratches of the wood are the reminders of the scars that the people have still on their bodies in some sense. We think about Jesus and the wounded healer, right? Stories. But he said, leave it there, but polish it up so people could see it. So when you go in there, you're reminded of all the things that people have been through over all the years. And so we did that, and then we put in the ramp, and he was the very first person to come and use the ramp because his son Seiji came when we finished it, brought him on his wheelchair up the ramp and into the social hall. And then Shiz got out of his wheelchair, and then his son said, "What are you doing, Dad?" And he said, "I'm getting down to touch the floor." And not only did he touch the floor, but he knelt down and he kissed the floor. Think about that, folks, about what this building meant to him, but also the people he watched build it. And so I want to just close with remembering these people and sharing an invocation of blessing from these ancestors. These ancestors who built the buildings, who were here at the time when they had to leave their homes with nothing and go off to the detention camps, and the people who have inherited that history and continue to carry on the legacies of their lives for the ministry that goes on today. And so from above, from behind, from to our sides, may we remember those ancestors. May we breathe in a deep breath of gratitude for the lives that they lived, as we ask for their blessings on these markers, for our history, and for what it means to carry forth their legacies into the world that we're living here today. Thank you very much.
He's so right. Never give a minister 5 minutes.
Got him.
But that's okay because Michael is very special to us. You know, while he mentioned Kaz, I'd like to, Kaz, can you please come up for a minute? Let's see. No one. Yeah, will you hold it? Kaz, this is Kaz Naganuma, who so generously provided his wonderful creativity and talent. But I just would like to show the logo of our project, Tonari Gumi, which means neighborhood. And so Kaz, this is his work, wonderful work, and the process took some of the buildings of Alameda. I don't want to say the estuary, but we are an island. And then bamboo, which means strength, and what's the other word? Resilience, because the bamboo kind of sways with the wind. So I just wanted to thank Kaz for his wonderful effort, his long hours with us in the planning, and just so much gratitude to you, Kaz. Thank you. Thank you. Tonari Gumi, which means neighborhood. Neighborhood. Okay, so I'm going to bring up Jill Shiraki, who was a member of our committee, Buena Vista committee. Well, actually, she was a marker on the marker committee, as well as Joe and Pastor Myrna and others. It's easier to talk.
So it's been an honor to work on this project. I came to Alameda in the 90s to work with Reverend Michael on the Sanse Legacy Project. And at that time, we were looking at the impact on the third generation, what our legacy is with the incarceration, history of incarceration in the camps. And in the early 2000s, I got a chance to work on the California Japantowns project, where we documented where the Japanese lived throughout the state and visited many small towns and learned about the history, including Alameda's. I've had the benefit of being a part of this church and knowing kind of the spirit that resonates here through all of the people. And so it's really been wonderful to kind of come full circle with all of these pathways. I do want to lift up another project that we've been working on side by side with Wendy Hanamura and Brad Shirakawa, and it's with the Alameda Library Project, and you'll be hearing more about that later. But that's an effort to digitize this rich history of a community through its pictures and artifacts and stories. And so that's been really wonderful. There are 4 markers that you'll get a chance to see. I hope you will visit. The first one is one is on Park Street, right in front of the marketplace over there near the driveway. As you're driving in, it's right to the left. And for that one, we had a small space, but we really wanted to talk about the businesses, the Japantown businesses in the early 1900s that were up along Park Street, across from Pacific. And so you'll see a map there by Ben Pease, and that will kind of ground you. And a lot of photos by Ozeki Mataichi Ozeki. So he was a local photographer, and he's actually Kei Atabe's grandfather. And he took a lot of the historic photos that you see on our markers. Really wonderful that those histories are preserved. And then we have another marker at the Alameda Free Library. And on that marker, we're able to talk about how the community really established and how the next generation, the Nisei, were born, and the sports and the activities and the culture that got passed on. So that is showed there. And then there are 2 markers, one at the Buddhist temple outside on the gates on Pacific, and our marker here that tell each of our unique histories. So yeah, it's just been really a wonderful project. I do want to say on the library, there's another map that we created that shows more the neighborhood where the Alameda Japanese community lived as well. So I think that's...
Thank you, Jill. Okay, Joe. My sister Jo is the historian, as Michael referred to her as, let's see, the walking trip guru and the historian of much of the Japanese American history here in Alameda. So thank you.
Hi, it's so nice to see so many of you here today. I know that you haven't eaten yet, so I will take that as a signal to keep it limited to my 3 pages of jotting. I want to welcome all of you, old friends and new friends. So happy to see so many people. As you know, this bazaar's been going on for 61 years, and it's such a beautiful day, and I think the spirit of the Holy Spirit in all names is here blessing us today. I'm going to talk about, I'm standing in front of it, but the marker that we have for Buena Vista is called, call it the beacon of light, because that symbolizes how this space represents a holy place, a sacred place, a welcoming place. I think if we had a little tagline to our brand, it would be, our doors open outward. In other words, we are welcoming to all who want to come. And I'll just start by saying, who came first? Well, they were these people from Japan who had a very bad economic upheaval, because the end of the shoguns, you know, the warriors and all that, it ended, and it displaced a lot of people. The economy was upside down. Everything was in upheaval. So they heard that California had gold hanging on the trees, and there was gold, you know, on the sidewalk. And so, of course, many people thought they would come to make strike it rich. Well, as most stories of immigration, all immigrants have the same story. We're looking for a better life. And when they came, of course, they came with what I call high hopes, but they met the harsh realities of what I call prejudice, discrimination. And we still have that in our communities today, and it's something we all strive to be more welcoming. So can you imagine yourself being here from Japan? You don't speak English, you had maybe $4 in your pocket, and what do you do? They were lonely and they were homesick, and you know what? They were mostly men. So what happens when you have mostly men? I call it the wild, wild west. You know, it was, I won't say they were rowdy, but I think we have some stories about, you know, the Wild West. I'll just leave it at that. Hungry, homesick, lonely, longing to go home. When this beacon of light was shown by two missionaries from a church, Episcopal church in the South, and they took these lonely, homesick, maybe some of them were homely too, I don't know. I think my grandfather was among them. So but anyway, they came and these missionaries brought them together and said, you know, we can help you. We want to teach you. They were evangelizing, but we want to bring you to Christianity. And the best way was to teach them scriptures through teaching English, and that's how it started. It was a night school, and they also helped for home, housing, and employment. And I'm not going to go into so much detail because you can read it on the board, but what I want to say mostly, and Michael, echoing Michael and Judy, this is the sacred place. We grew up 2 doors down. And you know, when Michael, you talked about mommy, and I don't mean to make it emotional, but mom was here every day checking out checking everything out. And 11 years ago, just now, is when she passed. So it's a very, very special place. It's even more sacred. All of us make it sacred. And without going into the long history, I wanted to just talk about the people who came. People from Japan brought with them some values that I think many cultures have, but one of the most important values was respecting your elders. They have a word for it. What is that word? Oyakoko, meaning let's respect our elders. It's the image of a child holding up their parents. We take care of our elders. Another important value is the opposite. It's kodomo no tameni. We do everything for the sake of our children. So those are the values that override a lot of our culture. Another value is work hard. And if you look around here, all the results of this bazaar was from the hard work of so many, and in a lot of ways, so few people. And when I say so few, it's that those who came before us are no longer here. They're no longer here in physically, but they're here in spirit. When I come here, I feel them. And then when I go look at that table in there, I can remember all the stuff that we talked about. All of you people, we gossiped and talked. And my library card from 1955 is still stuck on that table. Yeah. It is sweet because when I was in grammar school, I was the original nerd. When I cut school a lot, and they go, has anybody seen Joanne? And they go, yeah, she's at the library. So I cut school to go to the library. Oops. Okay, I got it. I'm gonna stop my talking. repeating about those two wonderful missionary women who took those lonely, homesick immigrants under their wings to point them towards a better life, teach them about God. They built this church. We're here because of them. And I like to remember that this is a sacred ground. Wherever we go, we feel them, we hear them. And our mission statement today, it says, we welcome all. We have our doors open. Some places you go, the doors are closed or they're not fully open, but we welcome everybody and we understand the value of each individual. So coming to this bazaar and enjoying all the food and the hard work that went into this marker, and I hope you look at it more closely later, is just remember that as you're here today, you're among great saints and our angels. Thank you.
I'm just telling my sister she did a great job. She did. Thank you. Thanks, Joe. You know, Joe just said, I forgot what you said, but anyway, if you read this, there's a term in Japanese that says okage-sama death, which literally means I am because of you. So, you know, that implies that we are not here alone. We have never been alone. We have our ancestors. We have our friends, ancestors. We are here because of you. And so, with this, we honor our ancestors who built this church. And I just want to say that, you know, the seed for this project was to honor our ancestors, and there were several families who said they really want to do this. Shall we put bricks on the floor on the ground with our names on it? No, we don't want to trample on that. Do we want to hang something? Well, maybe. So they contributed to a fund which we call the JA Legacy Fund here at Buena Vista. So I really want to thank them for planting that seed of memory so that we can develop a wonderful remembrance to our ancestors. And it is because of them that we are. So thank you. Pastor Myrna, do you want to come up and just close us and maybe let folks know what's happening at our next hour?
Let's give another round of applause to the planners, those who were involved, the vision, all that went into it, and of course for Kaz. We're so happy that you're here today. Let me just tell you a little bit about how we developed the theme for this year's Bazaar. It was easy with 125 years, right? But faithful hospitality seemed to really be what was one of the core values of Buena Vista. And in the planning committee, that was Judy, Linda Fong, myself, were working on the program. We decided, since we're looking at the 125 years, to look to the past, to look to the present, and to look to the future. So at 1 o'clock, I invite you, there's a door here. This is the sanctuary building. In the sanctuary, we're going to be having a program on the movement for reparations for African Americans. And we are very fortunate, that is the eye towards the present with an eye towards the future. It's kind of doing all of that. It will be led by Attorney Don Tamaki, who is here, member of our congregation, and appointed by the Governor Newsom to the task force. And if you've been listening to the news, you know that they just yesterday, I believe it was yesterday, they submitted their report, 500-page report. We won't be looking at all 500 pages. But we will get to see a film, also another one produced by Japanese-American filmmaker John Osaki, entitled simply Reparations. And then we'll have a Q&A with him and just the depth of his heart and the depth of his knowledge, and hear more about what's in that report. And it's not just what's in the soundbite on the news, there's much more to it. So that'll be at 1 o'clock until about 2:30, 2:45. And then after that, Coach Tani, who is our spiritual nurture coordinator, I never get your title right, spiritual nurture coordinator here at Buena Vista. She will be leading at 2:45, is that what we said? 3 o'clock? In the sanctuary to learn the ondo, the traditional dance. And this is based on a song that this community rewrote, and Matsumashimizu, did I get it right? Almost? That's right, Matsumashimizu is the tune, but words were put to it that fit Buena Vista and our legacy. And then Coke, listening to the community, put those movements and created an ondo. And so you'll have a chance to learn, and then we'll get a chance to dance and just loop around this building. So those are the events for today. And of course, there's food, there's games, there's all of the stuff that's Bazaar-y. But if you would like to also do other stuff, you'll be in the sanctuary. So thank you again for being here and helping us celebrate our Spring Festival Bazaar. Thank you.